Hello there, welcome along to an MMA conversation for Sky Sports. Remember, Bellator recharged every Saturday night on Sky Sports, hosted by the main man, referee turned analyst, Big John McCarthy. John, hello, how are you and how's Tennessee?
I'm good, Adam. It's great here. We're kind of open for business around here, so it's not like a lot of different states within our country, but things are going good.
Yeah, and obviously Florida, we know from watching from afar with the UFC, is open. What have you made of everything, and is hope springing eternal in Bellator circles now as well?
Oh yeah, I hope so. I want to get back to work, and I think that everything just takes time, and they had planned out when they thought they were going to start again. I think they're going to go with that plan. They're not going to push things forward too fast, but they're definitely going to put out all of the shows and all of the fights that they had scheduled throughout the year. Those are all going to come through. So it's just going to be a condensed version of the year.
How do you see it coming back in July? Do you see it coming back with a bang with Scott Coker's plans?
I think Scott Coker's got it planned out where he's going to bring all those fights that were supposed to take place. Especially, he's got that featherweight Grand Prix going, and there's two sets of fighters that were supposed to fight on March 13th that were not able to fight. And one of those being the champion, Patricio Pitbull against Pedro Cavallo, and so he's going to put all those fights first. Those are the ones that are going to be put out there. That way he can schedule the next round for the featherweight Grand Prix. And then like the championship fight, Bader came down. He'd been fighting at heavyweight, came down to defend that light heavyweight title, and Nemkov deserves that shot. He has gone through everybody they've put in front of him. So I see that fight happening right away, and I think he's going to go right back to what was scheduled. On May 9th, we were supposed to see Gegard Mousasi and Douglas Lima fighting for the middleweight title. I think you're going to see that fight coming back. All the ones that were scheduled that everyone was really anticipating, I think those are the ones that you're going to be seeing first.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting permutations around where these fights are held because that opens up scope, doesn't it? We've seen the UFC in empty arenas, but potentially there's talk about boxing promoters in England hosting it in their backyard and things like that. It's limitless now, isn't it? Do you expect something creative from Scott Coker? There's been talks of combinations with boxing as well, I believe, with Showtime. It's an interesting time in terms of the permutations, isn't it?
I wish I've talked with Scott, and he's got some really cool ideas. He has come up with things that no one has ever talked about doing. I wish I could bring them forth, but I can't because it's a secret. But he definitely, Scott is a forward-thinking promoter, and he's just a great man to work for. And he's always looking at different ways to make the fights interesting. And so when Bellator comes back, it's going to look really cool. It's going to be special, and the fights are going to be great.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it very much. Now, we've seen mixed martial arts come back with the UFC. We've seen incidents involving referees. You've been very candid in the past about mistakes you've made, both on the night itself and in retrospect. How difficult, though, and nuanced is it to referee, first and foremost, an MMA contest where there's so much going on and so many different disciplines at work?
It's a lot more difficult than it's a lot more difficult than people think it is, because you get a lot of people that say, I could do that, and it's so funny because I put on courses, and I'll get these guys to say I could, I've been watching MMA since the beginning, or I've been watching since I was a young man. It's like, okay, and you'll put them in a cage with two fighters that are going at 50%. You'll say, okay, just hey, if you see something, I want you to call it out. I want you to deal with it. And they'll go through this, we'll say 3 minutes of moving around with fighters. And I'll tell the fighters, I want you to do this foul. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. And I give them all these fouls to do, and they do them all. And, come to an end, we'll stop it and say, okay, how many fouls did you see? There weren't any. And everybody on
Wow.
the
Yeah.
outside will go, all right, how many fouls did you see? Oh, I saw he was grabbing the fence. He grabbed the shorts. He grabbed the gloves. He kneed him to the head on the ground. And they just start rattling them off. And the guy who's inside is like, I didn't see any of those, because it's not what you think. It's much more difficult than you think, and it's much faster. And when you talk about real fights, they're way faster than training. So you've got to learn how to pick these things out and how to see them. It's not an easy job, and it's one where when you get it perfect, that's what you were supposed to do. So, there's no gratification. And when you do the job exactly like it's supposed to be, you don't hear anything. It's when you do something or something happens that people don't agree with, then they're going to come down on you and give you all kinds of advice about how bad you are. But, what we saw in, some of the fights, there was no bad refereeing. There was instances. Could the refereeing have actually been a little better? Could he have done something different? Sure, that's in every fight.
Yeah, how do you reflect on Dominic Cruz's comments around referee Keith Peterson from his fight against Henry Cejudo, saying the referee Peterson's smell of cigarettes and alcohol? What's your assessment of how professional or otherwise that might be?
It's not professional at all. It's trashy. In fact, I know he's upset, and I can understand why Dom, felt like he could have gone farther. But you don't make statements that have no validity to them. There's no way you can validate what it's saying, and it's just not true. And when you say it, it's not so much, yeah, you're attacking that person's reputation, you're attacking their credibility, you're attacking their integrity. But you're also attacking every other official that's there. When Herb Dean is there, or Jason Herzog, or Dan Murgalata, and they're the other referees, do you think if Keith Peterson smelled of alcohol, they wouldn't go up and say, "Whoa, what have you been doing? You are not reffing," and they would go right to the commission, and the commission would then go and check out, Keith Peterson, and it's unfactual and it's not true. He was not happy with the call that Keith Peterson made, and so he made a rash statement saying, "Oh, well, this is what I thought." Now, I'm not saying that you can't, smell things. And I'm not saying that Keith may not drink at times or may not smoke. I'm not his, guardian. I'm not his babysitter. But I know that he didn't do those things there that night. And for Dominic to make that accusation, there's just no need for it. It's not classy in any ways, and Dominic is a classy guy most of the time.
You mentioned the Jason Herzog there as well, the fight Anthony Smith against Glover Teixeira. He's obviously come out and apologized for his handling of that. You've done similar in the past. I believe you've actually corrected a fight. Is it Sakuraba against Silveira back in the day? You actually corrected and amended a result. Should we actually applaud referees when they come out rather than perhaps criticize them after the event?
Absolutely. You take a look at the Sakuraba and Conan Silveira. That was 23, 24 years ago, but it's something that at the time it was corrected. Have I had other ones that I've done the same since? Yes. You can't see everything. There's times that, things happen. I have had fighters where, they've had clashes of heads, and it looks like a punch is what is the actual thing that hurts them. But it's actually the clash of head when you go back and you can watch it later on. And before we had the ability to use instant replay, I had a fight where I went to the fighter and said, "I want you to go to the commission and complain about this." I'll stand up, say, "You know what? I missed it. This is what I thought happened. This is what really hurt him." And that fight was overturned into a no contest because the fighter was injured by something that was not intentional, but was an illegal action, something he doesn't have to guard himself from normally. And so that's what put him on the ground. And so that's what you do. You do what's right for the sport. You do what's right for the fighters. Sometimes you're put in positions where you want to do something, but you can't based upon the actions of the fighters. And everything is about learning how you can manipulate the system, manipulate the fight. It takes time in being a referee to learn these things. Just because you're doing big fights doesn't mean you know them. And then you get in that position and then you don't have the answer. And then you go to someone and you say, "Hey, what's the answer here?" And when they provide you with that answer, now the next time, if that ever happens, you're going to handle it a little bit different, and it'll probably come out just a little bit better. And you'll be more pleased with the outcome of what you dealt with.
Do fighters generally respect the difficulty of being a referee? Because they certainly need the rest, don't they, to be there?
Yeah, I think for the most part, yes. There's always going to be fighters that I don't need a referee. That's a bold statement, and it's great to hear, and it's bull. It just is not true because all of them, there's a big difference. I'll bring up Anthony Smith. Anthony had a home invader come into his house while he was sleeping and he got into an altercation with that person. And he talked about, man, he seemed so strong. I was so scared, and he was scared. And I totally understand everything that he was dealing with emotionally at the time, because he's looking and saying, if I don't take care of this situation and this person gets the best of me, what does he do with my family? What happens to the people that I love? So it's a completely different situation. When you're an MMA fighter and you walk into a cage, you don't have to worry about things as far as someone pulling out a weapon. You don't have to worry about things as far as, if I get knocked out, I know that that guy is not going to just be able to come over and stomp on my head. That person that's wearing that black, shirt and pants, he's going to stop this, and I'm going to be okay. Now, anytime you participate in sports, you can get injured, you could get hurt. But for the most part, you're going to come out of this okay. And, Anthony had certain people say, you couldn't handle it. He had other fighters. And it's like, that's not the normal fight. That's not when you go into an MMA fight, you have someone there that if you end up not being able to protect yourself, that person's going to protect you. You may not like them, but you know that they're going to do what they're supposed to do. So it's a completely different situation.
Well, you've been very honest in the past. I've read articles with you outlining mistakes you've made versus submissions where you've not seen submissions, where perhaps there was a submission where stoppages, where you've stopped things prematurely, where you've not stopped things early enough. What is the most difficult aspect for a referee?
All of it. Yeah. It's all of it. When you're looking at it, the thing that I tell everyone is this: hey, you're human. You're gonna make mistakes. The sport is too fast. It's too many elements involved for you not to eventually make a mistake somewhere along the way. What you want to do is, when you make that mistake, don't sit there and try to hide it. Don't try to cover it up. Don't try to make an excuse about it. Embrace it. Say, you know what? I did make a mistake. I should have done that differently. Figure out how you could have done it so it would have worked out best, and then make that change and move on from that. Because if you let it sit there and smolder and just burn, it'll burn you up.
Let's take you to this week's show then at Sky Sports. We've got legendary Fedor against Frank Mir. When you reflect on that, and you talk about experienced heavyweights as well, how surprising is it that those two hadn't met prior to that Grand Prix?
Well, because of where they both were fighting at, I think it was like, let's say 2004. So we're going a ways back there. 16 years. Those guys were champions of their respective organizations. Fedor won the championship with Pride, and Mir won the championship with the UFC. And it was one of those fights that everyone would have loved to have seen come together. But because they were in different organizations, that just never happened. But there's world title fights, and then there's what I call mythical fights. And that was one of those mythical fights because we never thought it was going to happen. And to take a guy that was a multiple-time champion with the UFC against the guy who took that Pride title and never let it go, and then won, against all of these UFC champions. You got to figure, look at all the champions from the UFC that Fedor eventually did face and he beat. There's a long list, and it's pretty distinguished. So when they finally put that Mir and Emelianenko fight, they had the ability to say, well, who do we match up? Yeah, take that one and put that one together. Put the fight that everyone always wanted to see together. That's what fans should always be looking for.
Yeah, obviously with these nostalgic programs like the one Saturday, we know the result, and it didn't last too long, and Fedor was the victor. Where does he rank then in terms of all-time great MMA heavyweights?
Oh, as far as heavyweights, the guy has accomplished more than any other heavyweight ever. Obviously he's older now. He's 42, almost 43 years old. And yeah, he's changing. He's slowing down because it was always speed. Speed was what made Fedor who he was. It was hard to deal with his speed. Heavyweights had to work harder to try to keep up with the speed that he brought into a fight. And then he also had great technique. So Fedor, no matter what, people can argue all they want. He is the greatest heavyweight there has ever been in the sport of MMA. Will there be someone that passes him? Yeah, that's what life's about. That's why, champions are, come, and that's why champions go. But you got to figure, I'm just going to put this out there. He had a loss. I believe it was his fourth or fifth fight as a pro against Tsuyoshi Kosaka. And that loss the fight lasted about 18 seconds. And the loss was that elbows were not allowed. And TK throws an elbow, not on purpose. He misses with the punch. And the elbow slices Fedor. And they stopped the fight because of the cut. And because it was a tournament, they had to have someone go on. And the only one that could go on was TK, so they gave Fedor a loss. And then he had a run off of that of 28 straight fights. So really he had 30-some straight fights without a loss. You're looking at Khabib Nurmagomedov is at 28-0 right now. And everyone's like, oh my God. Fedor went longer than Khabib, really, with an undefeated record. And he's just been spectacular in the way he's represented the sport, the way he fights. He comes out looking like he's going to fall asleep, and then he turns it on, and he's explosive, and then just turns it right back off, raises his hand, and walks right back out, gives a little smile. He's a great representative for the sport of MMA.
Yeah, definitely worth looking out for on Sky Sports, that one. John, quickly before you go, obviously you've been around this sport for a long time. And I suppose people around the world are calculating risk now in terms of going back to their trade and their work. Give us an insight into the mindset of an MMA fighter and how they'll be looking at the risk of, say, coronavirus versus the inherent risk of competing in the sport.
I think the coronavirus is something that every fighter looks at and goes, well, I don't want that. But the world that they work within has a lot of, things that are placed in front of them that can be a problem. And illness or disease has always been something. They've been tested in the past for certain things to make sure that, okay, do you have this? Do you have that? No, you're clean of all these things. Well, the same thing's going to happen now with the coronavirus. They're going to get tested for those things. It's just one more thing that they have to get tested for, so they're not going to like that. But that's part of not only their health and safety, but also their opponents and the people around them. So, there's no perfect in anything. Could someone get by the system, and could they, get a false negative when they're actually positive? Anything can happen. This is the world we live in. But I do believe that fighters realize, hey, I got to move on. I only have a select time that I can do what I do and make money so I can support my family. So I know all the fighters are saying, hey, let's go. Let's get back to fighting. I understand the coronavirus is a problem, but let's do the things that we can limit the ability for that to be a problem for us, and I want to fight.
Yeah, we look forward to fighting coming back with Bellator. Hopefully in July is the plan. And we look forward this Saturday night to seeing you once again, John, on Bellator MMA Recharge. Thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you very much, Ed. You take care.
Great to see you, John. Take care as well. You out there, take care. Remember, Saturday night, Sky Sports MMA Bellator Recharge, looking at that heavyweight Grand Prix from 2018. Goodbye for now.